I think the first thing is to keep in mind, just how important it is. We are social creatures by design. We need each other. This is it's a priority for us. What we thought would be a really useful topic to discuss today would be how it is that we form meaningful relationships as adults. Because in some ways it does seem, Tim, as though a lot of the usual ways that we form friendships as we're growing up, whether it be at school or uni or, going out to parties and stuff when we're younger, start to taper off a little bit as we're adults. What's your experience been like, growing into adulthood and now reaching this pivot, we could call it, in your early 30s, and how that has affected your relationships and forming them?
From my personal experience, I've jumped around a couple of cities, so I've actually had the experience of kind of starting afresh. I moved down to Melbourne in my mid-20s and then was over in Berlin in my late 20s, and those experiences, they force you to create new friendship circles. So I kind of was forced to adapt and kind of find ways of meeting people, but I can understand if you've kind of hit your 30s and you're kind of feeling like you're lacking fresh connections.
I think the older we get, the more entrenched in our habits we become. We get used to a certain, routine. We, maybe go to the same place of work each day. If we only have surface, relationships in those areas, it does leave a big gap in our hearts and in our levels of enjoyment of day-to-day life.
The big game changer is making time and going to things on your own, perhaps, because when you're amongst friends and going to things with friends, you stay very insular. And I think we can all relate to situations where, you're at a gathering, an event, a party, you're really closing yourself off from even just taking in the energy around the space if you're constantly, at the side of your best friend or partner or whoever.
Brené Brown starts to come to mind for me, and the power of vulnerability. So it's not always the easiest thing to be the one approaching new people. And then once you have, created an acquaintance with somebody, it's not always easy to be, your authentic self in those situations when it's new as well. But somebody has to be the leader, and often the leadership in that relationship building sense really does require a level of vulnerability and, feeling your feelings like you were talking about earlier, and allowing yourself to share something that that person might not know about you just by looking at you. Sharing something personal and being the first one to do it, I think can be a very powerful way to begin to forge connections as well.
In today's world, I think we rely too much of the security blanket of being behind or protected by a glass screen as our interface to connections. And from my experience, people treat each other differently in a digital context, whether you're messaging on a social media app, you're never getting someone's full attention. And perhaps there's a silver lining to digital communications where people feel like they could be a little bit more open and disclose some information that would be too, uncomfortable in person. But most of the time, I feel like you're only getting a percentage of that person in that moment, and that can be detrimental to feeling like you're, being supported and acknowledged and all the things that make a good foundation of a strong relationship.
And so I think once we've gone through each of these steps as well, we've made it a priority, got out of our comfort zone, we've been a little bit more vulnerable, whether it be via the, a face-to-face meeting rather than just online, or we've shared something that's somewhat personal, then I think it's also a great opportunity to potentially learn from others, develop yourself through that relationship as well. And often what can be really beneficial is having an understanding of what your values are, what's important to you, and finding out what other people's deeply held values are as well. And once you get down to that level of values and value systems and what makes life meaningful for another person, there's a really big opportunity there for you to learn and explore something new, or see something from a perspective that you hadn't noticed before. So I think there's a real kind of personal development element to forming these new relationships as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's the beauty of relationships, is you learn from each other, and you kind of, sometimes they are a little bit of a mirror to see yourself in a fuller light. So being able to share experiences and share ideas, it's not only like being supportive to another person, which is rewarding in itself, but it's getting back a little bit about information about who you are and how you are projecting yourself in the world. And you touched on vulnerability, which is really important to building rapport with someone and getting to know them better. From my personal experience, I think it took most of my 20s to realize that being a good friend wasn't always just like being the rock and someone that could manage the emotional weight that someone was placing on me, but it was also being open and sharing some of my struggles. And I mean, whether it's positive or like happy emotions, sad emotions, like sharing a little bit about what's going on deep inside me. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't make a full relationship until both sides are sharing. And I think it took me a little bit of time. I mean, maybe that's a bit more of a common thing for men, but it's amazing how you can accelerate that bond in a relationship, whether it's a friendship or a romantic relationship, but being more open and trusting that that person is going to support and hold the space for whatever you're putting out there. I mean, that being said, I mean, use your intuition as well, and like go slow and be. You need to put yourself first, and you need to make sure that you are comfortable and safe and loving to yourself. But when you feel the time is right, and sharing those little insights really like brings the other person closer into your world.
And that's a really good point as well, what you were saying at the end there around still being careful with yourself in this process as well. That doesn't mean go and share your most personal secrets with anybody. I think it is really, really important to look for signs in other people that there is safety and that trust is developing. And actually, one way of being able to identify whether someone is going to be a good match in terms of building that authentic, mutually sharing relationship is, as I was saying earlier, understanding what their values are, and potentially even what their virtues are as well. What are some of the things that they do in their life that show you that they're going to be a good friend to you and someone who it's worth investing your time. So that's just the other side of it, making sure that you're taken care of in that process as well is a lot more sustainable, and I think very important for protecting your own health as well.
And this kind of brings us back to what we've been working on with Decompress, is holding a supportive space for people to be open and vulnerable. I mean, we're talking about relationships and they're a crucial part of life, and we're trying to create these workshops to be a special space where people can explore slightly more vulnerable sides of themselves, that it's potentially easier to open up to a group of new people opposed to someone that is really already close in your inner circle and has maybe expectations or a preconceived idea about you. That also comes from personal experience as well. I mean, sometimes it is easier to talk to people that are new in your circle but have immediately established this supportive space. So that's one of our key goals for our Decompress workshops. And if you're interested in joining one of our workshops, be sure to sign up for our mailing list and follow us on socials. And we'd love to continue this conversation with you. So if you have any questions or comments about what we've been chatting about, please leave them below, and we'll talk to you soon.